All right, so we're putting together a lesson for a 12th grade honor student for English. Now, what's the lesson going to be about?
So the student expressed interest in genre study. So we are going to look at the Romantic era in literature and transition into dark Romantic literature.
Okay, so for this lesson, how would you go about kind of introducing the romantic themes and all the other things that go along with it?
Okay. So because the Romantic era deals heavily with many themes, I would establish which ones we would be looking at for the semester and prepare the student with like a pre-reading activity of some sort.
Okay, so what reading activity do you think you would give the student?
So because the Romantic era wasn't just a literary genre, I guess, it affected the art world as well. I would give the student a visual representation of the Romantic era through famous paintings and have them observe how the characteristics of the Romantic era show themselves in a more visual standpoint.
So using more visual than literary examples to express the themes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So after you go through the artwork, what would you then do to kind of get the student to understand what y'all are doing?
So in an effort to solidify how the themes are shown in the paintings, I would provide a few questions that dealt specifically with some of the themes that were more closely related.
Okay.
Like sensibility, emotion, individuality. Maybe have them look at one of the paintings and see how those themes were shown in the painting, giving them the choice to kind of see how the themes were shown, and then for themes that are probably going to be a little more difficult, I'd have them research the meaning, and then have them define it in their own words, and then choose an artist that exemplified that theme.
Okay. So would you be guiding the student through this, or would you give them a set amount of time to work on it by themselves, or?
After going through the themes and having them look at the artwork, I'd probably give them independent time to work on the questions on their own.
Yeah.
If I noticed that they were having difficulty, I'd probably try to redirect them in some way so that they could do their best work. And if not, then I'd probably add more to the lesson so that they could do the independent work on their own.
Okay. Now this student specifically has had trouble with anxiety. So how would you are any of the instructions throughout the lesson specifically catered towards her anxiety?
So the student's anxiety usually shows itself when work is a little I guess dry or doesn't vary, and by not just throwing stories at them but showing them an alternative way to view theme, it might break up the monotony of an English class and help to subside a little bit of their anxiety about reading older works of literature, and also get them more comfortable with the themes that we're going to examine, so that they're not as anxious when it comes to examining the themes in a literary standpoint.
Now, would you, since you do an intro to Romanticism, obviously, would you then, how would the homework then, if you were to give them homework, how would that kind of expound on what y'all learned in the lesson?
So I'd probably have them, I'd probably add in like an examination of maybe mood or the content in one of the paintings, and then have them pick out specifically which characteristics of the Romantic era were present. And if not that, I'd give them a short poem from the era and maybe have them talk about the tone and mood or which characteristics they saw were present in it, so that they could get that independent study going and build that confidence.
Okay. Now, let's see. So, in regards to benchmarks throughout the class, obviously that's an introductory class. What benchmark would you end up hitting in that unit with Romanticism?
So along with getting a strong understanding of the characteristics of the Romantic era, a benchmark, I guess, to show like real understanding for the era would be to create a piece from that era. So I'm leaning more towards an ode, because odes are not from this era originally, but saw like a rebirth during this era, and sorry, and were used by many of the poets during this era to exemplify their work and their appreciation for this time in literature. So I would be building up the student to create their own ode.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's about it. Anything else you want to add to the lesson? How would you add any like videos or anything else that would, I guess, be a visual or auditory stimulant to the student?
It'd probably be to the benefit of the student to have an audio listening to some of the pieces, so that they can hear like the way that the words are supposed to be spoken, or maybe get a different view of the piece from someone else than from their own reading, especially if they don't understand what's being spoken or talked about. So maybe have a few audio listenings, or maybe even look at a film adaptation of a piece, so they can get that visual representation as well.
Okay. Now, last question, but how does your honors class for seniors differ from, say, a regulars or even an essentials class?
So there's a lot more independent work. Students are required to do more in-depth research outside of the classroom, rather than all of it inside of the classroom. They're also encouraged to annotate more deeply and independently. So there's a lot more work done on their own to show understanding, rather than work done with me in class to show their understanding. So they're responsible for getting, their work done on their own rather than with me in class. And they're also given a little bit more to do.
Okay. Anything else to add? Alright, you're good.